My twin brother falsely accused me of abuse, and my parents kicked me out at 15, but when they came back 13 years later asking for money after seeing me on TV, I exposed his lies to the entire family and destroyed them. I'm 28 years old. I'm a freelance content writer, and I basically live as a digital nomad traveling the world, which sounds amazing when I put it like that. But the truth is, I ended up in this life because I literally didn't have a home to go back to. My family kicked me out when I was 15 years old for something I never did. And what happened a few weeks ago when they tried to come back into my life after seeing me on TV? Well, that's the reason I'm writing this now. I need to get it out of my system because my blood still boils when I think about it. I guess I should start from the beginning. When we were kids. I have a twin brother, Chase. And for as long as I can remember, my parents treated him like he was God's gift to humanity, while I was, I don't know, like an accident they had to tolerate. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. It's literal. Chase could do whatever he wanted and my parents would celebrate it. He got everything he asked for. They enrolled him in every sport he wanted to try. They bought him the brand name clothes he wanted. And when he got bad grades, my parents would say things like, "Oh, he's just too creative for traditional classes," or "the education system isn't made for kids like him." I, on the other hand, got good grades and my parents barely noticed. They bought me clothes at thrift stores while Chase had closets full of Nike and Adidas. And if I asked to go to any extracurricular activity, they'd tell me there was no money. But somehow there was always money for whatever Chase wanted. The sickest part of it all was that we were physically different too. I mean, Chase was athletic and I was smaller and less sporty, and my parents acted like that was evidence that he was superior. My mom would literally say things to me like, "I wish you were more like your brother," or "Why can't you be athletic like Chase?" And my dad basically ignored me unless he was comparing me negatively to my brother. When we were like 13, I think my parents found out I had Snapchat, and, at that time all the kids had social media, but they acted like I'd committed a crime. They took my bedroom door off. Literally, they unscrewed it and stored it in the garage as punishment. I lived without a door for months. No privacy, couldn't change clothes without someone being able to just walk in. And the worst part was that Chase also had Snapchat and Instagram and everything, but they didn't say anything to him. Zero consequences. The breaking point, the moment where everything went to hell, was when we turned 14. My parents threw this huge party for Chase, invited all the kids from school, bought decorations, rented one of those bounce houses, ordered pizza, had a giant cake, the whole thing. I didn't ask for a party because I already knew how things went. But my grandmother, who was literally the only person in my family who treated me like a human being, took me to the movies and then to dinner at my favorite restaurant, and I had an amazing time, just the two of us. Meanwhile, Chase's party was a total disaster because basically nobody showed up. Turns out the kids at school didn't really like him much. I think they realized he was an insufferable brat, and only like 3 people showed up. My parents were devastated, like it was this huge tragedy. And when I got home that night after my perfect day with my grandmother, Chase saw me smiling and shot me a look of pure hatred. I swear I can trace everything that happened after that back to that moment, to that day where he had to face that he wasn't as popular as he thought and I had a better birthday than him without even trying. Things got weird after that. Chase started acting strange with me, like more hostile than normal, and then the rumors started at school. Some kids would ask me if it was true that I beat up my brother at home, and I'd be like, "What the hell? Where did you get that from?" And they'd say, "Chase told them." At first I thought it was some stupid joke, but the rumors kept going, and more people were looking at me weird in the hallways. Chase was telling everyone that I physically abused him, that I hit him, that I was violent with him, and people believed him because, he was the popular, charismatic kid and I was the quiet weirdo. What I didn't know until later, what I found out when it was already too late, was that Chase wasn't just spreading rumors. He was also hurting himself to create evidence. He'd punch himself in the face until he had black eyes. He'd give himself bruises on his arms. And then he'd go to my parents crying, saying I had done that to him. And my parents? God. My parents believed every damn word without even asking me. They never confronted me. Never asked me what happened. They just assumed it was true because their perfect son couldn't be lying, right? Everything exploded. When I was 15, the school principal called my parents for a meeting because several teachers had noticed Chase's bruises and were concerned about domestic violence. I remember sitting in that office with the principal, my parents, Chase, and a school counselor. And Chase told this elaborate story about how I beat him regularly, how he was afraid to be home with me, how my parents were never there to protect him. He cried. Did the whole show. And I was sitting there in total shock because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to defend myself, tried to say none of it was true. But every time I spoke, my parents would interrupt me and tell me to stop lying, and the principal looked at me with this expression of disappointment and disgust. They suspended me for 10 days. 10 days for something I never did, based completely on Chase's lies and the fact that he had bruises he'd given himself. When we got home that day, my dad went up to my room, started throwing all my clothes and stuff into garbage bags, and told me I had to leave, that he wasn't going to allow an abuser to live under his roof. I begged him, told him Chase was lying, that I'd never laid a hand on him, but he just kept packing my stuff and yelling at me to shut up. My mom was standing there in the hallway doing nothing, just watching, and Chase was in his room, probably listening to everything and enjoying it. My dad literally threw me out of the house. He put all my belongings in the driveway, told me he never wanted to see me again, and slammed the door in my face. I was 15 years old, I was a kid, and I was on the street with a couple of garbage bags full of my clothes. I had nowhere to go, no money, no phone because they'd confiscated it weeks before, and it was nighttime. I sat on the curb crying for I don't know how long, maybe an hour, until I finally walked to a neighbor's house and asked to use her phone to call my grandmother. My grandmother, God bless her, came to pick me up immediately. She lived like an hour away, but she arrived in what felt like minutes. When she saw my stuff on the street and me sitting there crying, she went into the house and yelled at my parents in a way I'd never heard. She told them they were a disgrace. How dare they throw a 15-year-old girl out on the street without even investigating the situation? That she knew I would never hurt anyone, and if they didn't let me come back, she'd call the police and Child Protective Services. My parents said nothing, just closed the door, and my grandmother took me to her house that night. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I went back to school after the suspension, but I was a total pariah. Everyone thought I'd abused my brother. Nobody wanted to talk to me. The teachers treated me differently, like I was dangerous or something. Chase kept going to the same school, obviously, and every time I saw him in the hallway, he'd look at me with this small, satisfied smile that made me want to scream. My grandmother was the only reason I didn't completely fall apart. She gave me a place to live, listened when I needed to talk, never doubted me for a second, and basically became the only family I had. My parents didn't try to contact me. Not a call, not a message, nothing. It was like I'd ceased to exist for them. Chase didn't reach out either, which was obvious since he'd orchestrated this whole thing. But part of me, stupidly, kept hoping my parents would realize something didn't add up and come looking for me. They never did. I spent the rest of high school being invisible, eating alone, studying alone, with no friends, because everyone thought I was this violent, abusive person. I graduated with honors, not because I particularly cared about school, but because I literally had nothing else to do with my time. College was my salvation. I got accepted to a state university like 3 hours from where my grandmother lived, got scholarships and student loans, and I could finally start over in a place where nobody knew my story. I studied communications and creative writing, discovered I was really good at writing, and started doing freelance content writing jobs to make extra money. At first they were small jobs, like writing product descriptions for online stores or blog posts for small businesses, but I realized I could make decent money with this, and that I liked it way more than the idea of working in an office after graduating. By the time I graduated, I had enough regular clients to work completely on my own. I started traveling, first just within the country, but then internationally, and became what people call a digital nomad. I've lived in Mexico, Colombia, Thailand, Portugal, Spain, basically moving every few months, working from cafes and co-working spaces, making good money writing content for tech and marketing companies. It's an amazing life. Honestly. I've met awesome people, seen places I never thought I'd see, and built a successful career completely on my own. During all these years, since I left my grandmother's house for college, I had absolutely no contact with my parents or Chase. I blocked their numbers, deleted them from all social media, and basically acted like they didn't exist. My grandmother kept me somewhat informed about what was going on with them, though I asked her not to. I found out Chase didn't go to college, that he was still living with my parents, that he'd had several jobs but none lasted long. Basically, it sounded like he was still the same spoiled, useless kid he'd always been, and my parents were still supporting him and doing everything for him. About 3 months ago, something changed. One of my content projects, a series of articles about working remotely as a freelancer, went viral on social media, and I ended up being interviewed for a local TV show about entrepreneurship and non-traditional careers. It was a small thing, like a 10-minute interview on a morning show, but I talked about my story of becoming an independent writer and traveling the world. And apparently, a bunch of people saw it. The interview got uploaded to YouTube and got like 200,000 views, which was completely unexpected. 2 weeks after the interview came out, I got an email from my mom. It was the first time I'd heard from her in over 10 years. The email was like casual and cheerful, as if nothing had happened, saying things like, "Hi, sweetie. We saw your interview and we're so proud of you. Looks like you're doing really well." I deleted the email without responding. Then came another one, and another, and finally my dad started sending me emails too. Basically, they wanted to reconnect, said they'd missed hearing from me, that they wanted to fix things. At no point did they mention what happened when I was 15, not an apology, not an acknowledgement that they'd kicked me out of the house over false accusations. After like a week of ignoring their emails, I got one that finally revealed the real reason they were reaching out. They needed money. Specifically, they wanted me to help them pay for renovations to their house because, I quote, "It would be nice if you contributed to the family home now that you're doing so well." The audacity, the absolute nerve of asking me for money after everything they did to me, after years of not talking to me, left me completely stunned. I laughed. Literally laughed out loud when I read that email, because it was so ridiculous it almost seemed like a joke. But it also gave me an idea. I replied to the email and told them I'd be willing to help them financially, but only if they met one condition. Chase had to publicly admit, to the whole family and anyone he'd told his lies to, that everything he said about me was false. I wanted my parents and Chase to make a social media post, send emails to relatives, basically clear my name the same way they dirtied it 13 years ago. I gave them a week to respond. The response came in the form of a text message from Chase. It was the most sickening and manipulative thing I've ever read in my life. He admitted, yes, that he'd lied about everything when we were 15. He said, and again I quote, "Yeah, maybe I exaggerated some things back then, but I was just a kid and I was jealous. It was a long time ago and you should get over it." Then he proceeded to tell me I was selfish for not helping the family, that I'd clearly done well in life, so what was my problem? And that if I really cared about my family, I wouldn't be putting conditions on helping them. Not a real apology, no acknowledgement of the damage he caused, just minimization and manipulation. I took a screenshot of that text message. Then I wrote a long, detailed email explaining the whole story. How I grew up being the unfavored daughter, Chase's lies. How they threw me out of the house at 15. The years I spent as a pariah at school. Everything. I attached the screenshot of Chase's message, where he admitted he lied. Then I sent that email to every member of my extended family I could find. Uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents on my dad's side. Basically anyone in my family who had an email. I also posted it on Facebook and tagged several family members. The response was chaotic. Some relatives responded horrified, saying they'd never known the full story and were sorry they hadn't been there for me. Others, the ones who were closer to my parents, sent me furious messages calling me vindictive and cruel, saying I was ruining the family over something that happened years ago. My parents sent me like 50 emails in one day, all furious, calling me everything, saying I was a liar and manipulating the situation. Chase sent me threatening messages, telling me I was going to regret exposing all this. I hired a lawyer and asked him to send a cease and desist letter to my parents and Chase. The letter basically said to stop contacting me or face legal consequences for harassment. I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, blocked everything. My grandmother, who by that point was like 76 years old, called me and told me she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself and that she'd cut contact with my parents too after all this. Apparently, several other family members did the same. It's been 2 months since all this blew up. My parents and Chase haven't tried to contact me since they received the lawyer's letter. Some relatives still send me occasional messages of support, which is nice, but mostly I just want peace. I'm still working, still traveling. Currently, I'm in Costa Rica writing this post from a cabin overlooking the ocean. I'm in therapy processing all of this. Because even though I feel like I finally got some justice, it also stirred up a bunch of trauma I'd been ignoring for years. Do I regret exposing my family? No, not at all. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was vindictive. But after 13 years of carrying the reputation of being an abuser, of being thrown out of my house like garbage, of building my life completely alone without any support from them, I deserved for the truth to come out. And the fact that they only reached out when they saw I had money, that they didn't even have the decency to apologize before asking for financial help, tells me everything I need to know about what kind of people they are. My grandmother is right when she says family isn't just blood. It's the people who support you when you need it most. And those people, for me, don't include my parents or my brother.